بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم، الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه وسلم. دعوني أتجاوز كلمات الشكر والثناء لمقدم هذه الأمسية، لأنه لا أعتقد أنه في ليلة جمعة وفي يوم عاشوراء وداخل منطقة الحرم من يجب على استضافة الشاعر البريطانية سوى القرشي الحامد والفاخر العز. سؤالي للشاعرة، my question to the poet is about what's your opinion about translation the poetry. Robert Forrest said once, translation, or he said poetry is lost when in translation. I mean, tonight we hear your poems in translation. Okay. How many of your poetry do you think was lost in this translation? Thank you a lot for all the enjoyment you gave us tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, shukran. That question is very interesting to me. I've been reading recently Mahmoud Darwish's book, Butterfly, and in the introduction, Fadi Judah says that translation, he's speaking really for, he's paraphrasing what some of the things Mahmoud Darwish said. And he said translation should be more than a new poem in another language. It should expand into that language new vastnesses, a new vastness. And I believe, although I can't understand Arabic, I am sure that Adnan's translations have added to my original version. So I think in the contrary, on my case, maybe some things are missing, but I think Adnan's translation would have actually added more and given a new perspective, a wider perspective and view of the poems. And I'm very grateful to him for that. And I believe myself that's what translation is about. I think we would be impoverished if we couldn't hear and read the poetry from people, from poets in other countries and in other languages. Thank you.
That actually was Khalaf al-Qurashi, who is a translator. He has translated so many short stories from English to Arabic. So thank you for answering.
Thank you.
أستاذ خلف سأل عن مدى أو ما هو الجزء الذي ممكن أن يفقد من خلال الشعر. استشهد من مقولة الشاعر روبرت فروست بأن ترجمة جزء العمل الذي يفقد. وتوجه للشاعر بالسؤال حول إلى أي مدى أو ما هو الجزء الذي تتوقعين أو إلى أي مدى تتوقعين أن فقد من النص، لكنها أجابت بأنها رغم عدم فهمها للغة العربية إلا أنها تأكدت بأن التراجم أو الترجمات أضافت إلى المعنى وأعطته بعدا أوسع وأشمل وإن لم تكن دقيقة طبعا.
And with all respect to the members here and to the poet and Mr. Sayer across the borders, we are not wondering tonight of reaching out poetry across the borders, but poetry really reaches out through our emotions, and this is of course part of our human experience and universal feelings. And really, our poets tonight have so many success in reaching us, not only across the border, but through our emotions. And I really commend her for this and thank you. As for translation, I myself, a personal experience of translating poetry, and I think based on my understanding of both cultures and a person who is a specialist in this area, I can think that, poetry can be translated with great success, so long as the person or the translator is competent and fluent in both languages and both cultures and both literature. My question to you, Mrs. Hamilton. Now you mentioned that you got in some bewilderment, difficulty, or kind of obstacle and barrier as to find some compromise between expressing your emotions and getting in accord with the rhymes. Of course, the sonnets, as we all know, is a well-structured poem, whether Spencerian, Petrarchan, or Shakespearean. So, if you can please comment on this, because really we are in between even in Arabic here, between the classical poetry and the modern poetry, and the argument and debate of which one really is expressive of voicing meaning, opinions, and emotions. Thank you in particular, and thank you all for the respected audience.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I think that I had already been translating some French prose, 2 books from pre-war that my mother had been given as a teenager growing up in Toulouse in France. And these books were French prose, but they had originally been in Arabic. And I fell so much in love with the language of them and the territory. And I knew immediately that I wanted to start working with them, with the French through my mother's language, and trying to put them into English poetry. And I chose the sonnet form for one of them, which was it's a legend of Lala Magna, an Algerian Muslim woman saint. And I have attempted to put that into sonnets. Now, because the French language was so beautiful, I found it came much more easily to use this beautiful French language, which, the story itself had originally been in Arabic, and to try and put it into a fluid sonnet form. And it was wonderful working like that. My surprise was when I wrote the sonnets, started writing the sonnets for my mother in difficult circumstances, when she was so ill, and as you say, it was very, very emotional, and I was very conscious of not being a great poet, but trying to do my best and trying to do justice to my mother and to speak really and to be honest about my own feelings and what was happening. And I think it was this conflict, the difficulty of the day-to-day emotional difficulties and the prospect of my mother dying, and that sort of clashed with the poetry. And that's not a justification, it's just how it was for me. And I know that better poets would have managed that, and indeed they did. We have poets like Primo Levi, Jean Cassou, Ivo Andrich, Adnan, who have all written poetry from the very place of extremis, where not somebody else was dying, but they themselves were threatened. And they still manage to have written very beautiful, very musical poetry from that place. But I believe we all do the little bit we can, and maybe I'm just a small stitch in the great tapestry, where other people have, great poets have wonderful designs. But I do believe we each have our own place and can contribute. Thank you.